Hello, everyone. This is Betsy Wurzel, your host of Chatting with Betsy on Passionate Roll Talk Radio Network, a subsidiary of Global Media Network, LLC. Our mantra is to educate, enlighten, and entertain. The views of the guests may not represent those of the host of the station. Folks, I have to say that today, the day that I am recording the show, is September 19th, the special day. It is the 5th anniversary of Chatting with Betsy. Hip hip hooray. And I want to thank everyone who listens, subscribes. Thank you so much. Thank you for your support. And please tell your friends about Chatting with Betsy because I want to help as many people as possible. And I have phenomenal guests on. In my opinion, they are phenomenal. I learn from every guest. I know that you will too. And I'm here to be a resource for you to help you have a better life. And with me today is an exceptional person. I just met Ron a few months ago. My guest today is Dr. Ronald Dwinnells. He is author and writer of 30 Days, Half September, a novel, which on the cover is the book is absolutely stunning. And on the cover, it has Literary Titan Book Award. So that is impressive. And Dr. Ronald is a medical doctor. He's a healthcare executive, educator, and medical researcher. He is CEO for One Health Ohio, founder and president of Butterflies and Hope Memorial Foundation. And I'm so honored to have you here with me today. Welcome, Dr. Ronald Dwinnells, to Chatting with Betsy.
Well, thanks, Betsy. Thanks so much. And congratulations on your 5th anniversary. I didn't know that. So that's remarkable. So congratulations.
Oh, thank you so much. And I am just thrilled to have you on. You're a very busy man with all the things that you do. How did you have time to write this amazing story? And I'm going to pick your brain, Ron, as how did you come up with this story? It's wonderful.
Well, okay, first of all, people ask me that all the time. Yes, I am kind of busy, but I guess that's my downtime. That's my hobby time or whatever, if you will. It's when I need to relax and just take it easy from a long day's work or whatever, and I just sit and write. It puts me in a different mental perspective. It puts me in a different place because I can create. And I can be whoever I want, and I can say whatever I want to say, and I can create all kinds of scenarios. And to me, that's relaxation, and it's fun. So I guess that's kind of, I don't know, it's not a perverse way of having fun, but I think it's it's a fun thing for me. So I do find time, and if you think about it. There are 24 hours in the day. I do sleep well, so I sleep 7-8 hours a day, and then I work probably about 10 hours a day. So that leaves quite a bit of time to do other things. So I think part of it is time management, probably. So as a physician, many years ago when I was in medical school, I had to be very vigilant about time management. So. That's where that came from. I don't know, but anyway, so that's my time to write. And in regards to the book, this was based on a true incident that occurred to me while I was in medical school. So the incident stayed with me. It was a very powerful incident, and it stayed with me for many years. And about 25 years ago, I just started jotting ideas and thoughts down. And then over time, I had a whole bunch of notes, and I just thought, well, I'll put it all together, and it came out. That's what came out of it was this book, 30 Days Half September. So I obviously fictionalized that incident, and kind of became creative with the incident. So I guess you probably want to know what the incident was, right?
Yes. Well, I'm thinking it has to do with a medical student.
Yes.
Learning humanity.
Yes, absolutely. So the incident was, so I'm a fourth-year medical student, and I just started a new rotation. We had 1 month rotations back then, and it was in September. So on September 1st, 1982, I started a internal medicine rotation. So I had 4 weeks on this internal medicine floor, took care of, sick patients and so forth. So on the very first day, I worked up, we call them working up when we admit patients to the hospital. So I worked up a patient from eastern Kentucky. So I went to medical school in Lexington, Kentucky. So we had all kinds of patients from the eastern part of the state. So I was asked to work up, or I wasn't asked, I was told to work up this patient for admission. And in the book, this was Miss Dixon, and she, true to the realism here, she was an elderly woman from eastern Kentucky, didn't have a strong family support, and came to us for an evaluation of a spot on her belly, or in her stomach, as she said. And so my job was to figure out what that spot was. And the spot turned out to be pancreatic cancer. And so we found that out. We gave her, it was pretty spread by the time we found out. And but we gave her supportive care back then, and even now, pancreatic cancer is extremely difficult to manage. And she deteriorated through the month. And on the very last day of my rotation, on the 30th of September, she passed away. And that was really powerful to me, because here's a person that I met on the very first day of September, and she outwardly looked normal. She was fine. She was just a normal person. And over that 30 days, I saw her deteriorate and so forth. But what she did for me in that 30 days was I got to know her, and that was probably my first patient that I got to know in terms of just ideas, thoughts, life, and so forth. And I realized, what I was learning from her. I learned empathy. I learned, the caring aspect of medicine, the compassion that doctors should have, and those kinds of things. And I always thought, thinking back on those incidents, especially that one, was, we don't learn that in medical school. The medical school education is all about scientific things that we have to learn, the pathology of diseases, the physiology of how things work, and, the biochemistry. We learn the hardcore sciences. So dealing and working with patients becomes a whole different art form that you don't learn in medical school. So that's what I got out of it, and that realization came to me during the time I was taking care of her, and it stayed with me the rest of my my medical career. So anyway, so I was inspired to write this book, and I wanted to make it a good story. I wanted to make it a story that affected somebody in a very positive way, which was in the book the medical student. So that's kind of how it started, Betsy, and things just kind of went from there.
Wow, I have to say, Ron, that the story was so heart-touching, and I don't like to give away the story because, folks, you have to buy this book and read how this medical student in the story changed and why he changed. But you touched on something so important, Ron, that I have to go back to it. you're not taught, right, empathy and compassion, medical school. So many doctors and nurses do not have that. You know, they're all about the science and not knowing that individual. And I know with time limits, it's impossible to know every person. But I was just talking 2 weeks ago to a palliative care doctor. And to know the person, you know, like when my husband was in hospice, nobody asked about Matt. No one asked how he was as a person. To know that individual, their background. And I just think that's so important in being a doctor or being a nurse and just being a human being, actually. You know, you don't have to be a doctor or a nurse. Excuse me. To have compassion for another human being. But I think that is just so important to bring out. Do you think that people who are training to be doctors, that is something that can be taught? Because I tried teaching that to when I was in preschool as a teacher's aide. I tried teaching the little boys and girls to have empathy and compassion when they did something that wasn't that hurt, you know, their friend, whether it was taking a toy away or something. Like, you know, how would you feel if they did that to you? Is that something that, well, I hope it's being taught more now in training, but is that something you think that could be taught to someone? Empathy and compassion.
That's a wide open question there. Well, I don't think so. And I say that it's not 100% obviously, but okay. So you're familiar with the concept of emotional intelligence?
Yeah.
Okay. So emotional intelligence encompasses all that. You know, basically the art of dealing with people, talking with people, empathy, support, those kinds of things. And so what happens in medical school is, first of all, now I think things have changed a little bit since I've been in med school, but way back when, the selection of medical students who gets to go to medical school were primarily based on grades and how well you did on the entrance exams. Okay, so very left brain stuff, very analytical, very scientific, and not too much on the artsy side, the right side of the brain, the arts, the literature, those kinds of things. So you tend to get a group of people who tend to be more technical than artsy, if you will. And
right.
And so what happens? Right, yeah. And so you get those kinds of personalities to even begin with. These are and back then, you had to be really competitive to get in med school. It's true today too, but for example, in my med school, the year I applied, there were about 3,000 applicants for 108 spots. So wow. you had to be really on top of your game in terms of your schooling and your education and your grades and so forth. So so because of that, you tend to be more technical because the pre-med curriculum was predominantly scientific. So it's all analysis and it's all memorizing and and not a whole lot of creativity. So you get, I think you start off with a personality that tends to be more, I don't want to say robotic, but again, more technical. And
right.
So I think it's different now. I think the selection processes are a little bit different now, and I think they take more normal people. I put that in quotes. But
well,
yeah,
I know what I understand what you're saying, Ron, because I was a nurse back then, and
right.
the mentality, really, how doctors were trained, and it was back then mostly male. That's just the way it was, folks. It was mostly male at that time.
It was.
You didn't show emotion. You weren't allowed to. You weren't allowed to complain or show that you were touched by someone. You know, it was like, okay, you know what this job entails, now suck it up. That was the attitude back then.
Right.
Hopefully it's changed.
That's a really good point. You're right. I think it has changed. One of my daughters just finished medical school up in Michigan, and you know, she related a lot of things to me, and I think it's changed for the good from that perspective, for sure. But just to make a point there, yes, you were right. We had to. I don't know why, but they kind of wanted us to. I feel like they wanted us to be more stoic. I don't know why.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, and back then we weren't as open as they are now in terms of telling patients things like, you know, like these days we have my charts where you can go and you can tap into your hospital chart and look at all the labs and what they were saying about you and that kind of stuff. Well, back then it was taboo. You know, you know, So in the book I do talk about one of the things, and this is a true part, is one of the things that Miss Dixon wanted, the elderly patient character in this book, was she wanted to go home. She wanted to go home, and she knew she was dying, and she wanted to go home in the most desperate way. And I'm a medical student, and I understand her, and I had many talks with my attending physician, and there were two reasons why they didn't want to send her home. She wanted to die in her house, but she's in the hospital. So one was that she didn't have a strong family support, and she's from Eastern Kentucky. They didn't have hospice, you know, or anything, any type of care like that available in her area. And then the second thing is she really didn't have family members. So the hospital was fearful for legal aspects. So they didn't want to send her home. She dies, and then they get sued because they send her home. So, you know, so a lot of it was somewhat medical legal, that they couldn't send her home, but they never told her why. You know, and they would tell me, and I would say, well, you know, they said that we can't send you home. But why? And I would tell her, well, you know, we're concerned about support. She says, I don't care. I just want to go home. You know, so, but you know, that's kind of the way it was back then, and and that always bothered me. And I, you know, again, that's probably one of the reasons I wrote the book too. Is a lot of times we don't have as much compassion as we should for the patients. I'm not knocking the medical industry at all. It's just that I know these things because, you know, I've been there, type of thing.
Right, so, right.
Yeah.
I understand. Yeah. You know, there's some doctors that are, you know, there's good and bad in all professions. There's some doctors that have a wonderful bedside manner. There's ones that don't. But sometimes ones that don't, they're excellent at their job. So, you know, not everyone has a good personality is what I want to say. But at least, you know, to know what they're doing is the most important. I have to pick your brain about your creative process because it was fascinating to me. It always fascinates me when I talk to you writers and authors, is how did you come up with the dialogue? That's what fascinates me. You know, like the dialogue between the characters. Did you have in your mind ahead of time? Do you do it as you go along? What's your writing process like? Yeah,
that's a really great question. So I've been asked that before, not the dialogue part, but how do I create the story? I always believed in if I knew the ending of the story, then I could write the whole story. So I always start out with the end, because that's how it's going to end. So how do I piece it together from the beginning to the middle and get to that end? So that's kind of the first. I need the big visual picture. I need to know what happens. So then I go back, and then I start. The second part is the very beginning. Well, how do I start this? And how do I start it so that I can match something with the ending? So so when somebody reads the ending of the story, they can think back on the first part and say, "Oh, well, that's why that happened," or "Oh, so that's what happened." So the first chapter, I'd like to try to keep it a little mysterious, like try to get the reader somewhat eager about reading the book in the first place. Like, oh, okay, and you'll notice that. I think you'll notice that in the book that I wrote. And then at the end, the answers are there. This is why that happened or whatever. So that's kind of how I do the process from a macro point of view. The micro point of view, creating scenes and the dialogues and so forth, it just comes, Betsy. I don't know how to, I don't think about it. I just start writing, and pretty soon I know what they're saying to each other. I visualize it in my mind about the characters, and I know what I want that character to be. I know what kind of person I want that character to be, and then and if I know that, then I can create the dialogue. So, like in this book, Jack, the medical student, for instance, starts out being quite a irascible kind of person. So what do irascible people say? Well, they're negative. And they don't like anybody, and they don't like the world. So it was kind of easy to create, the monologue part of his part. And then in the book, he has a best friend who's worldly and who's smart and who's more stable and so forth. And so I know what his character is. So I know his responses to whatever the other character says. So it just comes. It's not it's not researched, or it just kind of comes. I don't know how, but it just comes. So
that's a gift. It does. I think some people are just naturally gifted. Now, I have trouble. I know what I want to say on paper, but from my brain to the hand, I don't know. I can't just. It doesn't come easy to me. Let me put it that way. So I really admire you all who write. Excuse me, books.
Yeah, that's the fun part. Is it just comes like, and then sometimes I'll write something and I just chuckle. So I'm working on another book right now, and I have a nursing home scene, and it's about two old ladies, and they're fighting. And they're fighting because, and this just kind of comes. So they're fighting because one's 86 and the other one is 85. So the 86-year-old asks the 85-year-old, "Hey, what year were you born?" And so she tells her, and she says, "Well, that's when I was born. So you must be 86." And the other one says, "No, I'm 85." And this was, "No, you got to be 86 because you were born in that year, and that's when I was born." And so they start having a fight about it, well, it turns out that one was born in January and one was born in December of that year. So, and it's now May. So yeah, you're going to be 85 and she's going to be 86. So,
right.
But they have a fight. But it was amusing to write it, and I was chuckling as I'm writing about it, because you can picture it, right? Two elderly women, arguing. Yeah. So then they're yelling at each other. So then you got two big burly orderlies come in, and they don't say anything, and they're both in wheelchairs, so they just push them away, not saying anything, and then pretty soon they start arguing about who's sicker, who's got the more ailment, So So these kinds of things, you can't really make it. It just comes.
Well, that I'm envious. What can I say, Ron? I couldn't put your book down. Your book is intriguing. I laughed. I cried. It's a beautiful story. It's a love story. It's mystery, and it's the difference you see in Jack, the medical student, because he had Miss Dixon as a patient, changed his life. And that's, really what the book is about. And you learn about Miss Dixon, and, she wanted to teach this guy a lesson. I think she saw the potential in him, but wanted to teach him a thing or two about humanity, because he was mad at the world. He was a very angry guy. And the change in him, and this is just a fascinating novel. And if you're writing another book, I want to read that one because this book, and my son read it. He just got done reading your book, and he enjoyed it. And it has, about a little about World War II. And this, and I felt like I was there, I was in the car with, and Miss Dixon's, younger years, and I don't want to give the story away, but, that I was in the hospital with her, and just, it's so heart-touching, how you brought out all the characters in this book. And Jack's friend, who really helps him, Miss Dixon also, and this friend helped him see, and plus his boss, the doctor that he was under, excuse me, to see I want to say the error of his ways. Miss Dixon, everyone saw he had potential, but he didn't see it himself because he really didn't want to be a doctor. That's not what he wanted to be. And then you see just a complete change in why he was, mad at the world, which I don't want to give away. And just the lessons in this book that, sometimes I think, Ron, all people need sometimes is to have that good friend, that good mentor, to see something in someone they don't see in themselves and bring it out in them.
Yes.
And it could just change their world.
Yes. Yeah, I'm a big believer in influencing. How do you, isn't one of the purposes of our lives is to try to give positive influence to other people? And that's a big part of this book as well. Miss Dixon was dying, and she wanted to insert something very positive in a person that she saw, like you say, the good in him. She knew he was a good person deep inside, and she wanted to bring that out. So that was her whole plot, to get that out of him. So yes, you're right. You're right on, and thank you for saying those things. That's very, very, very kind of you. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure. I speak the truth here, folks. I don't have a script in front of me about what I'm going to say to my guests, other than the notes about the guest. And sometimes I can't read my own handwriting.
That's me. Yeah.
And make mistakes. But I just was so truly touched, and I was thinking as I'm reading your book, Ron. I mean, I've read books from other doctors, but it's usually on their practice. You are the first doctor who wrote whose book that I read that has nothing to do with your experience. You wrote a novel. You wrote a love story, and it's a love story among different levels. It's a love story between two people who were in love, two lovers. It's a love story between Jack and his horse. it's a love story between friends, and it's just different kinds of friendships, different kinds of love, and that love never dies. Even if your loved one dies, the love and the memories, they don't die, which more people would realize that. And I feel that you brought that out in your book also. And
okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's a beautiful, just a beautiful love story. As someone, as myself, who I, as you know, lost my husband, and I'm reading this book, I'm like, you know what? I'm glad you wrote what you did, because it shows that love never dies. And you don't forget the memories, and you miss them more each day. You don't miss them, well, in my case anyway. And in Miss Dixon's case, she didn't miss less. She missed her friend more. And through all those years, and she still loved him, because love doesn't die. And you show that in your book. I loved it.
Okay, good. That was my purpose in the very beginning. So I'm glad it did that. You know, it's that means the world to me. That you know, there have been other people that, you know, that have said, oh yeah, that was a great book. It's, you know, I understand it and so forth. But you're bringing out more the intimate details that I wanted people to really see, and so thank you for that. That's very heartening for me. So thank you. That makes me feel really, really good.
Oh, you're welcome. That's why I like to read a book, if I can, before I interview someone, because I feel I don't always get a chance to read someone's book, but I prefer to read a book so I know what I'm talking about.
Right.
When I interview someone, because to me, Ron, I can interview someone about a book. I want them to know, who's Ron Dwinnells? Why did you write this book? What is it, you know, like, what does it mean? Why should they pick it up? What should they get out of it? These are the questions that people, I know that I ask myself, and people would ask, and I have to tell audience, folks, get this book. It's really fantastic. I don't care if I sound redundant. It's just a beautiful, beautiful book about so many things. Love, friendship, relationships. I mean, it's just, I could go on and on. Where can people buy your book, 30 Days Had September, a novel?
Oh, it's you know, it's on Amazon. In fact, we keep running like these, I don't know, specials or whatever, you know, for like Kindle books. You can get them on Kindle for, I think we have it going for like $4 something now. You know, but it's Amazon, you know, the usual, the bookstores. You can get them at like Barnes and Noble, on the internet or at the stores. But yeah, it's you know, the distribution is typical.
And how would people connect with you to know more about you and all the wonderful work that you do? Because you are incredible.
Yes. Oh, well, thank you. You're giving me such a big head, I won't be able to leave my office. No, I have a website. It's Ron, R-O-N, Dwinnells, all one word, DWINNELLS, at rondwinnells.com. I don't go on it that much, so I can't remember exactly. But, you know, it's one of those, if you put in rondwinnells.com, then it'll come up as a link type of thing. So.
And I have to ask, I don't remember, what kind of physician are you, Ron?
Pediatrician.
Pediatrician, I thought so.
Yeah, I'm a baby doctor. So,
I thought you were a pediatrician.
I was going to make a comment before about, you were saying, or we were talking about, you know, bedside manners and so forth. And there's a stereotype amongst people who look at who view doctors as basically the surgeons are the mean ones. And if there's any surgeons out there, it's not coming from me. It's just a stereotype. They're the ones that's cold and very calculated, and of course they have to be. They're surgeons. That's their personality. But pediatricians generally tend to be the really nice people because they're happy. They're with little kids, and most kids get better. Once you're older, you tend to get chronic diseases and so forth, and you don't always get better. But little kids almost always gets better. So it's a happy service that we do. So I like to say, yeah, I'm kind of a friendly guy.
Well, that's so funny that you said about surgeons because I've interviewed trauma surgeons and I've interviewed pediatricians and other, doctors, and it takes an anesthesiologist. It does take a special personality to be a surgeon, to be an ER doctor. I just interviewed a pediatric palliative care doctor.
Oh boy!
What a rewarding but challenging career. It's just amazing. You're right. Each doctor, goes into the field. Hopefully, that suits their personality. But it's funny. I've told the audience this, but I'll tell you, Ron. When I worked as a nurse in a hospital, doctors intimidated me, and I would want to run down the hall when I saw a doctor coming. And now I'm interviewing doctors, so it's and I love interviewing doctors. So it's very strange how the turn of events that happened.
Yeah.
And would you like to plug tell people about your foundation?
Sure. In 2016, my mother passed away, and she left us. I had two brothers, and she left us a little bit of money, and I didn't want to squander the money away because my parents were not educated. They were labor workers, and they worked hard for their money, and I just didn't want to just waste the money away. So I decided to create a foundation called Butterflies and Hope. And the foundation is to support behavioral health issues in children and adolescents. I know from being a pediatrician all these years that that's a tremendous source of illness and lack of well-being and so forth if you don't grow up right. So one of the things that's very forefront in the research of pediatrics is this concept called ACEs. ACEs, ACES, stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. So we know that kids who grow up in abused families, and this is some of it's common sense, abused families, whether it's physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, whatever. If those kids who live in families where there's violence, fathers beating up mothers, gunshots in the house, those kinds of things, we know that those kids' what they call neural pathways in their brain do not develop properly. And then these are the kids that grow up to become our future depressed people, our future suicide victims, our future drug addictors, those kinds of things. So the point is if we can identify these kids early on, can we do interventions to try to improve their lives and evolve them and develop them into more happier human beings and more happier adults and those kinds of things. So So anyway, there's obviously a lot more details to that than what I'm saying. But so one of my interests is to support activities based around identification and helping them. There's a concept called resilience. Help them evolve and develop resilience so that they can become better human beings and better adults. So I don't know if that made sense.
No, it does.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
so,
I'm a big mental health advocate. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I do remember that. Yeah. So so one of the things that I do a lot is I support like local conferences and talks on those types of topics, and a lot of behavioral health counselors come to those. First responders, teachers, those are the people that are not that aware of this concept called ACEs, and so we try to teach them and train them and so forth. So it's sometimes they use the term trauma training. It's mental trauma. So it's training these people to identify who these kids are, and then to see if there's interventions that can be done. But anyway, that's and we do other things too. Like there's a grief camp nearby. Kids who've lost even pets, but loved ones and so forth, and they have this grief camp, and I'll support them, like through little scholarships that they can get, so they can go to summer camp for a couple of weeks and get some counseling and support and those kinds of things. So that's, in a nutshell, that's what the foundation is for. And as a pediatrician, it came naturally to do something like that. So
that is so awesome.
Oh, thanks.
Well, thank you. You know what, Ron? I would love to have you back next year and for you to talk about your foundation and how important mental health is for young children and adolescents. I'm a huge mental health advocate, and I know as a child I had suffered with depression. Of course, back then you didn't talk about it, you didn't talk about anything, and how important it is to address the mental health of children and adolescents. Wow, you are truly an amazing, talented person. I love talking to you, and thank you for spending time with me today. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. And just briefly, my next book is called Climbing Jacob's Ladder, which is about a severely disabled child who has positive influence on others. Even though he's severely disabled, he still has influence on others. And there is a little bit of, not a little bit, but there's content about, behavioral health in children, PTSD in the caretaker, which is the mother, and this is also based on a true event in my life. I took care of a child with severe cerebral palsy for about 8 years, as a physician, and he really influenced my career, I think, in a better way. So anyway, so that kind of ties in with this foundation as well, and the talk about writing books. So,
wow. Well, when will that book be out, Ron? Climbing Jacob's Ladder. When will that book be out?
I don't know. I finished the draft actually, and I'm just going through it again for corrections and changes and that kind of stuff. Then I'll give it to the editors, and then then it'll go to the publisher. So I don't know. I'm hoping within a year. 6 months.
You contact me. You make sure you contact me because I want you on. I want to read it, and I would promote any book that you write because you are an amazing writer, and
thank you.
I would love to have you back on Excuse me, folks. So thank you. The book is 30 Days, Half September, a novel by Ronald, I'll spell the last name, Dwinnells, Dwinnells. All the information about Dr. Ronald Dwinnells will be in the blog, which our station manager, Jeannie White, writes and produces the show. So thank you, Jeannie. And thank you to Lillian Caldwell, CEO of Pastor World Talk Radio Network, who makes this all possible. And again, folks, thank you for listening and sharing. Please share the show. I want to help as many people as possible. And I can only do that through your help. So I appreciate that. And if you want to follow me, I am on Facebook, Betsy E. Wurzel, Wurzel. And if you need a support group, if you're a caregiver, #Kick Alzheimer's Ass Movement. And go on Ron Dwinnells' website to learn more about him, because he does wonderful work, and he has another book out, and I think that it will benefit anyone. I haven't read it yet, but I will read it eventually. And it was just a pleasure talking to you today, Ron. So the guest today, Dr. Ronald Dwinnells. And as I always say, folks, at the end of my show, in a world where you could be anything, please be kind, shine your light bright, because we need it now more than ever before. Until we chat again, be safe. This is Betsy Wurzel, your host of Chatting with Betsy on Passionate World Talk Radio Network, a subsidiary of Global Media Network, LLC. Bye-bye now.